Yeah, I think that's good. Hey, Shelby, welcome to the show. We are live streaming for one of our big moments here. Doing some of our first live streams today, which is very exciting. So, Shelby, welcome to the Barna Breakdown.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and hello to all your listeners and viewers.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. So, episode 19. Now, you were episode number 2
Mm,
back in the day. So we've gone 17 episodes between having you on, which is good. So we're growing, working. We got some sponsors. I want to say thanks to Ting, who's helping us out with the show. Also want to say thanks to BCHA, who is making this stuff happen. I posted that you and I were going to be talking today at 3 o'clock and asked for comments, questions, things like that. It was birds chirping silent. Didn't hear anything from anybody on any questions that they might have for you. So it is live. So I will be watching the comment section today as people, if you have questions, comments, you have anything for Shelby today, for the Mayor Sandpoint, go ahead and put it in the comment section, and I will be glad to ask those questions when the time comes for that. All right, with that, we start off every show, Shelby, with a good report. So we are always looking for some good news, right? And also, I think everybody can find something to be grateful for, something
hmm
that is worth saying thank you, and is a good report. So do you got anything on your plate that you'd say, hey, this is a good report?
Yeah, well, lots of things. I mean, you mentioned gratitude, and on a personal level, I'm very grateful for my wife
Come
and my
on,
family, my
yeah.
kids, and our health, and that we're doing the best to kind of weather through this thing. And at first, that when the schools closed, it was kind of the joke of oh my gosh, how do we maintain full-time jobs and now also be homeschool parents?
Right, yeah.
And But the cool thing about it is, of course, it's overwhelming, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what's really amazing about it is how it gives us this opportunity to spend quality time with the kids that we never really get to otherwise, at
Right.
just a deeper level, and to really focus on their learning. And so I feel really blessed to be in that process with
That's
them.
awesome.
So that's been great, and to be partnering with my wife in that too. So that's been great. And at the community level, I've really been amazed at here we are going through this unprecedented
Right.
crisis.
Yep.
Everybody's just having such a hard time, and we're really just kind of getting into it now. We're having record unemployment claims right now in
Mm-hmm.
the state and in the country. And so many people here locally have lost their jobs. People already are struggling to pay the rent, to put food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then now, in this crisis, their job is gone or has been dramatically reduced.
Right.
And on top of that, they've got kids at home, right? So how do you do it all?
Yeah,
So
that's a
one thing that's
challenge.
been it really is, and one thing that has just continued to impress me is how our community continues to step up and support one another.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible. And I don't know I think that's one of the reasons that Sandpoint is so special and why we all choose to live here, is because
Right.
there's something, I don't know if it's something in the water that, plays out in how people uh, take care of themselves and take care of one another. But so many businesses have stepped up to the plate and make sure that everybody's being fed. The
Mm-hmm.
school district is
Mm-hmm.
putting out bag lunches for all the kids.
Yeah.
Arlo's restaurant, the Burger Dock, the Pack River store. Tonight, the Hoot Owl is doing a dinner from 4 to 7 for anyone who wants a meal.
Come on.
Um, so that's just unbelievable. So
Right.
there's food out there for families in need, and of course there's always the food bank, and the sort of the normal resources that are always there. And
Um.
another thing that I
Yeah.
want to mention just about that sense of community solidarity and what we do as a community to step up and support each other, support our well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And just a week ago, as this crisis was beginning to unfold here in Idaho, and let me mention, I mean, it was only what, 10, well, actually, I guess now it was 13 days ago that we had the first case reported in Idaho.
Right.
Now we have over 200. So to go back, a week and a half, at that time, it was actually Wednesday before last, 9 days ago, that I declared a state of emergency in the city. And I strongly encouraged restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues to close dine-in service and go to takeout only.
Right.
And remarkably, by Monday, we had 100% compliance. As far as I'm aware, every restaurant and bar in town, on their own accord, chose to close for the health and well-being of our community.
This community has totally pulled together in a really powerful way. It's amazing. Yeah,
it really is. And I don't think, obviously, you couldn't pull that off in Seattle. You couldn't pull that off in New York. And I don't think you could pull that off in probably any other small town, maybe of our size. So it really says a lot about our community and how we care about each other and how we do everything within our power to do the right thing and take care of each other. So
come on. And that's a good report. Right. I mean, that's a really good report. We got a little bit more time with our families. Mika and I were talking earlier, my wife, we did a broadcast to test a little bit earlier today, and we ended up doing a whole show. It was pretty funny. So, one of the things that we talked about was how, the way that we approach this season and this time with our attitude and our mindset will really dictate what kind of outcomes that we ultimately get out of this. And so choosing to kind of have a openness to what could this look like? What could this be in a healthy, positive way? It was super, super good. So, we talk here locally. My good report is that that stimulus package for small businesses, individuals who are employed, all that kind of stuff, that got passed, which is great. And it was done bipartisan, which is rare. It was good. It was a fight process from both sides. And so it's good to see it finally done and signed off by the president. So with all these things, raise your glass, man. Let's say cheers. We say cheers to the good report. We'll go ting, right? And then we're going to
That's right.
take a sip because, we gotta celebrate the good when it happens.
Yeah.
So good.
And let me, I want to second you on the stimulus bill. And I just want to focus on a little bit of the details there. I'm sure most of your viewers are probably aware, but
trying to get aware.
And we can talk about this a little bit.
Sure.
So that's a $1,200 check to every taxpayer, as well as a $500 child credit, $500 per child, and then there's also up to a $600 per week if you file an unemployment claim. Up to $600 a week for those who are working the gig economy, who are freelancers. So people can take advantage of that as well. And I know that's, maybe, it's not going to get us all the way there in terms of, filling the hole that's been left by the change
virus.
in and just, obviously the impact on our jobs has been huge. And so that's a big hole to fill, but this is nonetheless something really to celebrate. And also want to mention too, something the city's done is to abate utility payments through April. So to give locals a little bit of a relief there as well.
That's great.
And then I also spoke with the governor's office today, and I know they're considering next week, they're considering a potential eviction freeze. And that's on the table as well. So those who are, concerned about, housing security right now through this, that there's likely to be some relief there as well. We can keep our fingers crossed there.
Yeah, I know that from a housing perspective, this is one of the biggest fears, especially people who live paycheck to paycheck, and that last paycheck of the month pays next month's rent. And so that's such a huge concern about, even when we go through this process, there's going to be a period of, I think most landlords and people in this situation are willing to say, yep, sure, it's going to take a little while to get stimulus money. It's going to take a little while for certain things to kick in. But putting a freeze on the evictions, I think will be helpful, especially for people who are just really in that really hurting financial position. But how that plays out and how that walks out to the next level, we have no idea at this point. We don't know what this is all going to look like. One of the things that I liked was that for small businesses that retain employees, that they get loans currently in order to pay those employees. So small businesses can get loans. And if you retain those employees through this process, then those loans become forgivable. So they're actually, for small businesses, they're able to get, and I was just doing a little research before we got on, because I'm like, I just was on when it got passed, I was on the show with Mika, and I'm preparing for this, and I'm looking around, but I just thought that was great. We've got a small business loan that you can take. And if you retain the employees, that you normally would have had to have laid off, if you retain those employees, they'll pay you in a loan to retain them. And for those employees that you pay and retain, those are ones that you'll get that loan forgiven. Which I think
is
there
that
was like,
is that through the SBA, or is that
I don't know. I don't
okay.
know who it's through. I was just listening to the highlights, and while I was doing some other stuff, and that kind of caught my attention. And I think they put 300 or two or $300 billion towards those small business loans to help small businesses get through that. That was the number one question that I would get as I'm talking to different people is, what do we do with small businesses? That's great that individuals get a check, and if you file for unemployment, but if you're like a gig economy or you're a small business person, what do you do? How do you, because of course, profits are lost. Like when you're a small business, you don't just get to stop. Like most small businesses earn 1 month of their revenue is what they bring home for income. So they've got 11 months to make the basics, and then 1 month of profit. And then, when you look at how that averages out, so then you take a month off, you just lost all your profit and revenue as a small business. To me, that's a staggering thought.
It is. It really
having
is.
been a small business owner, that's a staggering thought. Like all of my revenue for the year just got lost over the course of a month. And so being able to make sure that your employees are paid, and I don't know how the SBA loans are working. I haven't done too much digging, but I know there's a lot of money being thrown at that.
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely great to hear. And of course, Sandpoint, we're all about small business. That's what we have here. We exist because we are filled with we are a community of entrepreneurs and small business owners.
We are.
And
and
so that there's a resource available for them to stay open, and an unforgivable loan to keep employees employed. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm the paychecks towards the individuals, I think they said that for a family of four, they could be potentially receiving $3,400 a $3,400 check for a family of four. I think that's a multiplier of however much that child tax credit is, or whatever that the child amount is. One of the things that I thought was really good in the stimulus was, I'm always focusing on the good, by the way. I try to keep my focus on the good things, because it was funny. I was reading a post of what we would consider non-emergency things that got attached to the bill. Things that people were kind of upset about. And I saw one list, and it was $250 million worth of stuff going towards, arts and different things that you're like, what? This isn't connecting for like the panic that we're in this kind of crisis. And I was doing the math, and 250 million out of 2 trillion is 1.25%. Like if we could start wrapping our head around the magnitude and the size of what just happened,
Right.
it's pretty wild. And then also, it was good to know that that no corporate entities can do buybacks of stock during this if they receive funds or loans from the Fed during this
Hmm.
process. They can't do loan buybacks like they were able to do in
Yep.
'08. So
That's
I think that
fantastic.
just protects the consumers and protects the employees as far as how that money works. So I was like, kudos on that stuff. It was great.
Yep.
Yep.
That's good to hear. Thanks
Cool.
for
So,
sharing that.
how are you and the family doing? In this quarantine.
Yeah, well, I think we're probably all in similar situations. It's of course an adjustment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned, having the kids at home and working from home. We've our employment has been impacted too. We're down to you know uh, less than a one full-time job from two full-time jobs.
Right.
So it's definitely impacting our finances and it's stressful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's I think that I'm hopeful that we're going to get through this. It's going to be hopefully short and sweet.
Come on.
That this pandemic isn't going to disappear next month, but the goal through measures taken by the governor on Wednesday and that are being taken by governors across the nation is to slow the spread as much as possible, flatten the
Right.
curve, and this
Right.
is strategy that's being taken all over the world. And what we can do is we're not going to be able to just eliminate this thing, eradicate it, at least until we come up with a vaccine, which hopefully that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that can happen. It's not going to happen in the immediate future. But what we can do is we can flatten out the curve on this thing
Sure.
and not overwhelm our healthcare system. And then we can actually treat those who actually need treatment, and thereby dramatically reducing the potential deaths that could result. So
Right.
so I think
Yeah.
this thing's going to be with us for some time, and we're going to have
Mm-hmm.
to live with it. But it doesn't mean that we're going to have to work from home and homeschool our kids for now and evermore.
Yeah. Right. This isn't going to last forever. And
Yes.
um, when you look at it's interesting because right now I feel like there is such a huge there's becoming more and more of a gap in data. Whereas it seemed like about a week ago, the data was pretty set and pretty clear about how the pandemic was moving, what the death rates were. And now, you have I don't know if you saw that the guy who put out the original empirical college study in the UK that
Hmm.
estimated 500,000 deaths in the UK, just revised that down to 20,000. And and part of that is from steps being taken, right, to reduce
Hmm.
that,
That's right.
which is good. But then he also had to say, I was reading some of the data wrong,
Mm.
for that. And so with all of the kind of confusion, because I think most people are getting their news online right now. I think most people are looking towards their network and social media to tell them what's what. And I know that we've talked about this many times that we get siloed, and in our silos we'll often not we'll often just see kind of the things that kind of support our bias. What do you as a city, what type of resources are you guys looking at for best practices and the things that you guys should be doing as a city, and kind of what the outlook is?
Yeah, well, we follow CDC guidelines
Okay.
and Panhandle Health Department. Panhandle
Right.
Health Department is itself in alignment with CDC guidelines. So,
Correct. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that
Great.
and that's been consistent really from the beginning.
Great.
So
Great.
we've been following that, and then also seeing as we watch this thing unfold, really from the first case in Washington, watching steps that other cities and other states are taking, and fortunately we've had the benefit here in Idaho to
Right.
learn from the trials and tribulations of every community that's been more heavily impacted before us,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and it's for that we're very fortunate, and we're also very fortunate that we have the opportunity to really to take the precautions that we're taking now when
Mm-hmm.
we've hardly had an impact here in our state. I mean, I don't want to say hardly, because for the over 200 people that
Are
have
dealing with
contracted,
it.
we've had 3 deaths in
Yep.
Idaho. So for those families, this is the real
It's
deal.
not a
This
little
is
thing. Yep.
It's not a little
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
But
Agreed. Yep.
relative to the tens of thousands of cases that we see in New York, by comparison, it's just and it's growing by 6,000 a day. It's
Right.
just it's crazy what they're having to deal with over there. But
Yeah.
we've really had the privilege of being able to learn from the experience of those who've been impacted before us, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's it's been great to have that kind of leadership guidance for us,
Yep. Yep.
and in that regard too, along those lines, I really applaud the governor's leadership
Mm-hmm.
in making his proclamation for the stay home order on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, the city was considering similar options for the city of
Mm-hmm.
Sandpoint. In fact, I had a resolution before council that very evening, and of course, none of us anticipated that, or I can speak for myself, but I got a call at,
Yeah.
I think it was 10:30 or 11 that morning. I got a call that the governor was going to be making an announcement at 12:30. So that was a surprise to me, and I really applaud him, making that difficult call. I know how hard of a decision that is for a leader to make. Nobody
Right.
wants to make that decision,
Yep.
because the impact on Idaho families and is just, it's devastating, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's not
the
easy.
idea is it's not as devastating as dealing with tens of thousands of deaths that could have been avoided.
Yeah.
So
So
that's the balancing act, and I think that was the right call.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
it's interesting because I do my best to try and keep my feet into all the different communities here, because Bonner County is a large land mass, and the city of Sandpoint's in the middle and kind of is the heartbeat of what a lot of the things that happen as the county seat. And one of the things that came up in that process was really, and I think people being, hearing about the resolution and being pretty upset, that there was a resolution out there that the mayor of Sandpoint wanted to get some emergency powers, and what all would that entail. And I don't know if there was clarity maybe on what the ask was. So maybe you can explain a little bit more, at least for our viewers, a little bit about the emergency powers. What does that entail? What kind of scope of power does that give you? Because there may be a time where that comes up in the future. It didn't end up happening this time because the governor stepped in and said, "Hey, here's what we're doing," and you're like, "Okay, we're good." Seemed like that was the
that's
response.
right.
I think from everybody on the city council was like, "It's not necessary at this point."
That's right.
So what does that declaration of power really entail, from your perspective, and kind of what, not just what you were planning on doing, but what's kind of what does it entitle you to, I guess, as a mayor,
Yeah.
to do that?
Well, they're pretty broad powers, really,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not. And I think we didn't have. We were still developing, fine tuning the protocols of, how and when we would roll out further
Okay.
restrictions on
Mm-hmm.
business and social activity.
Mm-hmm.
So we were working on that plan, and it wasn't,
Okay.
we hadn't crossed our T's and dotted our I's at that point, but it was really kind of, following again the general guidance that we see other cities taking, and other measures that other cities are taking, and so it was really in accordance with that. So under Title 50, Chapter 6 in Idaho Code, the mayor has pretty broad powers, really, in a state of emergency to protect the public health and welfare of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So the resolution, but those powers have to be granted by ordinance through council. So
Correct. Yeah.
the mayor
So
can't just on a whim decide he wants to go close all the businesses, right,
right.
or
Yeah.
take any other
Yeah.
drastic action, right? So that
Right.
those powers have to be activated by the council,
Mm-hmm.
but they're actually enforced and executed by the mayor. So that's what that ordinance was about.
Okay.
And if further, if if things changed, I don't know, this thing is still unfolding day by day and week by week, and we can't anticipate, what this could look like in the future. But,
Mm-hmm.
part of the discussion that happened at the council meeting, for instance, is that, the governor could decide in 2 weeks or a week and a half, oh, okay, we're good on this. We don't want to do this anymore. Let's lift the stay home order.
Uh-huh.
And then, it could be just at that time that the outbreak is really getting going here in Sandpoint, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it could be that, because if everybody opens back up, people are moving around again. Seattle opens back up, and people are feeling free again, and they just can't wait to get out of the house. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now we get, flooded with tourism, and
Yep.
now we get a hotspot in Sandpoint. Now we've got a
Right.
serious issue that has to
It
be
is.
dealt with, right?
Well,
So the
yeah,
only
go
way
ahead.
that would happen at that point is, again, for the the same kind of ordinance would come up for council consideration again.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the only way that we as a local entity can take control of our destiny in terms of doing what we can within our constituted powers allowed by the state
Right.
state
Yeah.
code
Yep.
to protect the health and well-being of our community.
One of the things that I see being tossed around a little bit is, eventually, in order to get the economy moving, doing a soft rollout of certain areas that are free to move. You hear the Southwest Airlines ding. You're free to roam about the country. I think that there's going to be the concept of like red zones and green zones, right now, North Idaho, like Bonner and Boundary County, would be a green zone. We have no cases reported in Bonner and Boundary County. At least from what I saw for Bonner County, I don't believe there's any in Boundary. But as of this morning, there were no cases. We haven't done extensive testing. We've got, a lot of maybe gaps in that. But for people that are feeling symptomatic, that go into the hospital, get tested, they've all come back negative. With that being said, we would be a green zone. And as a green zone, people who are in a red zone, where it's like Seattle, where it's hot, there's a lot of infection going around, and there's a lot of people who maybe are taking the use of ventilators, and whatever their situation may be. And of course, we know that a lot of people are asymptomatic, and if they're traveling around, if they're in a red zone, this to me presents like, oh, where are you going to go? If you don't think that you're sick, I'm going to go to a green zone. Right. And then that could eventually become a big long-term issue for green zones becoming red zones down the road. And so, and I hear what you're saying with like, even if it opens up, we have to be cautious. What's kind of the data?
And let me tell you, that's exactly the position we took 2 weeks ago when I came out and declared the state of emergency for the city. At that time, I strongly encouraged bars and restaurants, entertainment venues to close, at least a dine-in service. And the idea was we still, obviously, we had no reported cases. In fact, at that time, we didn't even have a reported case in Coeur d'Alene, right? So there was only, I think at that time, it was, let's see, I think that was even before the first case in Idaho, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was, yeah.
So, but what we saw was that we saw more than the normal amount of Washington plates downtown, right?
And so,
so Spokane was starting to shut down at that time.
Well, they had some of the first cases dropped in there because of their ability to treat it. That's
right. And so of course Seattle was getting shut down. And so of course, people are coming here. Many of them have second homes here. Mm-hmm. They have vacation rentals, or they renting vacation rentals, or whatever. And so now all of a sudden, just to your point, we're a green zone. We're a place where people can go find their normal life, right? Go somewhere where they can go out to dinner, go have drinks, and kind of forget about this whole thing.
Yep.
And so it really just made us a target, really. And so that's why I came out with that order. Really, what might have seemed prematurely, but it was really protecting us from tourism, from those hotspot areas.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder about as we move forward and we look at, the potential of red zones, green zones, and people getting back to work, what is some of the things that you're looking at as mayor, to go, wait, hold on. We need to, stay in a place of putting things on hold, or we're free to move forward? Because if it's area by area and it's like kind of opens up a little bit where the localities have a little bit more freedom to make these determinations, which it seems like it might be if we're a green zone and they're like, you're free to move. And there's still the cautionary, like, well, we're not sure what's happening. What are some of the data, things that you're looking at to make those decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. And right now, I really don't have an answer for that
Okay.
because
Yeah.
we haven't seen anybody coming out of this yet, right? So
Yeah.
again, we're sort of, again, we have the privilege
Yeah.
of being able to look to others who are sort of, weeks ahead of us in this ordeal.
Uh-huh.
And right now, we don't have any good exemplary leadership to look to. I mean, the only, we've got China, South Korea, and Singapore that have made it through this, right? Well, I don't think
supposedly,
that those are,
yeah.
supposedly, right? They're
Yeah.
they're mostly through it. I mean, they're still,
Yeah.
China is actually, still getting a few cases, and
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure they are still getting a few cases, um, but the reality is, we haven't seen that in the West yet,
Yep.
and I think we're going to have to kind of wait and see how this thing plays out. I guess on the bright side, we have some time to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
We still got 2.5 weeks to go with this
Mm-hmm.
stay-home order right now.
Yep.
So we're going to start putting together put our heads together to think about how we can actually unwind this thing once we
Yeah.
round it all up, right?
Yeah. 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 No, that's good.
But
That's
yeah,
good.
we'll be looking to other cities who are, taking the lead on this. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like Washington is starting to get a little bit of a handle on this. They're certainly not seeing the blow up that you see in New York and that you're
Right.
seeing elsewhere in the East,
Yeah.
and even
I don't,
California.
I was just like, you just look at New York and you go, how do you do a 6 foot separation? I mean, that's a big town with
Exactly.
extreme density. You're
really
like,
is.
oh man. And that's like when you look at Wuhan, China, well, that's a town that's bigger than New York with even greater population density. So I think those things are all interesting, factors that we don't necessarily have to deal with here, in the sense of density. Like we're not sitting in a 50-story building with each other.
You're absolutely right.
So,
Yeah.
because
And
that's
you can go for a walk or go for a run.
yep.
Just leave your house, and I mean, I'm like 6 blocks from Ponderay Bay Trail or City
Yeah.
Beach,
Yeah.
and I can walk around downtown and not even have to pass by somebody, right?
Right.
And even in Seattle, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And certainly can't do that in New York. So we just by and we're relatively urban for Idaho, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
Boise, there's Coeur d'Alene, and then you Pocatello, Twin Falls, okay, but
Mhm.
we're one of the larger cities, if you can call us that, in Idaho, because it's such a rural state, and that is really going to work to our advantage as this thing continues to play out. We
How
just
so?
have the privilege because we have the privilege of I mean, we are naturally socially distancing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right.
we're so far apart.
Yep.
And
Yep.
again, to your point, in New
Yep.
York, you can't walk outside your apartment and stay 6 feet away from people.
Mm-hmm.
You walk 10 minutes to work and you're going to pass about 5,000 people. Right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Totally.
it's just, or you get in a cab, or you get in a subway, and you're in public spaces where there's just constant human contact from literally thousands, if not millions of people. And we're just not like that here. We have, we get in our car, we drive to work,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, I think that one of the biggest changes for us culturally is training ourselves not to shake hands, right? Not to like hug and shake hands and
So
do that sort of normal
yeah,
greeting
I've
behavior,
caught
right?
myself the other day of being like, hey, all right.
Yeah,
Nope.
exactly.
Nothing. Yep. So, it seems like you guys will have a few weeks to put together plans for some of the what ifs. in the sense of that kind of stuff? And are you going to kind of get like how are you going to get input on those plans? Where are you kind of go to for those, as far as putting those things together?
Yeah, well, again, we're going to continue to follow guidance from the CDC, Panhandle
Mm-hmm.
Health. We'll be in continual contact with the governor's office. We'll be taking cues from other cities like Seattle, who are really a month ahead of us on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, and I think we're going to get a lot. We're going to start to see how others are addressing this, but
Right.
I think it's kind of just sit back and pay attention and listen to the experts in this
Right.
really.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I mean I think that there is such a large contingent of people in the county who are generally concerned about the governor's order, right? They're
Hmm.
concerned about that, and they're concerned about whether or not the you as a mayor takes over more power than they believe that you're supposed to have, and in any given situation. I was having a funny conversation with a friend of mine who said that somebody said what Brad Little did as the governor was illegal by the Constitution. I said, well, it was legal, not legally legal. Like you got this kind of weird thing. Like if you just go by, because it was according to the Constitution that there's rights that are being violated. I said, yeah, except for all the other laws that have been added on top of that that give municipalities the rights to do some things. And so it was kind of funny because even in the moment of going, I don't like, if you're, maybe conservative and you say, man, I really don't like what feels like a more loss of rights. Like I can't go out, I can't do certain things. I think it's really good to understand the why behind, and I thought the governor did a good job of explaining why. And it wasn't just we're going to be scared of the virus. It was no. Here's what we're seeing, and here's why. And
Hmm.
I think the more that the city's able to give those big whys as you go through your process, I bet I think the more easier it'll be for people to understand.
Yeah.
What's going on with everything. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I appreciate that perspective because I think the hardest thing for people to kind of wrap their head around here locally is the fact that we don't have a case here, right?
correct.
We have no
Yeah,
reported case, and
no
so
reported cases. Yeah.
why are we closing all of our businesses down if there isn't a problem here, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, and I totally understand that perspective.
Hmm.
But I think what we see by looking around the world and looking around the rest of the country at this point is, we had our first case here in the U.S. Gosh, it was only what, maybe 5, 6 weeks ago,
Yep. Yep.
and it went from one case to now we're pushing 100,000
Hmm.
all over every state in the country.
Yep.
Okay, that is even with all the measures that we have taken state by state,
Hmm.
that governors have taken, that mayors have taken, and all the guidance
Yeah.
from the CDC to
Crazy.
encourage social distancing. And people have been practicing this.
Hmm.
I've been amazed at, again, giving kudos to our community, and hopefully it's been the same in other communities around the nation where, even a few weeks ago, before there were any declarations of
Right.
emergency or any of that, when the CDC was coming out and making these, recommendations to practice social distancing and to take certain measures at your place of employment and stay at home and work from home if you can, those kinds of things. Practice good, breathing etiquette, cough into
Yep.
your arm, sneeze into
Yep.
your arm, that kind of stuff. Don't shake hands.
Yep.
So people were really embracing that and practicing that. And so, people were taking the right steps and protecting themselves. And this was happening, is happening here, is happening around the nation. And yet
Hmm.
still, it went from one to 100,000, right?
Yep. Pretty quickly.
And
Yep.
I mean, this is a big deal, right? And
Hmm.
so, and what that says is how communicable this disease is. It
Right.
spreads very easily.
Yeah.
And
Mika and I were talking about that. She's a naturopathic doctor and is trying to stay up to speed as much as possible. And she's like, man, this thing stays alive a long time. Like,
mm,
if you like just the fact that the way you have to use an elevator now, like you got to put something between you and that button, because that button could very well from somebody an hour ago still have the virus on it, like not realizing how
Yeah.
communicable this disease is. And so that's just pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Most recently, I read, I think it was 11 to 12 hours on a metal surface.
yeah.
Several hours, like it was like three to, don't quote me on this, but I think it was
hmm
the 3 to 4 hours on clothing or something like that.
Yep.
Um, but only, I think it was only like less than an hour or something on cardboard. People are concerned about, well, what about like UPS packages, or what about, getting something at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So
Let it air out.
yeah, yeah,
Let it
that's
air
right.
out.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I want to move
something
on
to
a
be
little
aware of.
bit
Sure.
from the coronavirus stuff. We've got two other, I think, kind of hot topics that have been circling around for a while. So I figured I'd just get an update from you on what you kind of see in some of that stuff. So one of the things is this city county lawsuit that you guys are. Can you give us just an update from the city's perspective? And I'll probably have Dan on again and get the county perspective as I try to just, really hear what's happening on your end of things. So where are things at?
Yeah, well, it hasn't progressed much. So, as last reported, gosh, what was it, about a month ago? The city filed for summary judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And the city's position is that, the county didn't have any standing in this case, and therefore it wasn't worthy of being considered by the court. So that the court should just make a summary judgment on it and dismiss the case. Um, the county responded saying, "Well, okay, well we need to do our
Discovery.
interrogatories. We need to do
Yeah.
our discovery, right?"
Yeah.
So we're basically in this phase of discovery right now, and then the coronavirus epidemic hit. So I know you
Right.
wanted to move on, but here
No,
it
it's all
all
good.
comes back to
No,
coronavirus.
yeah, I
So
know lots of things are on
um,
pause. Yeah.
yeah, so the courts are have very limited activity right now,
Mm-hmm.
and even certainly since the governor's protocol, but even before that with the social distancing guidelines and things, it didn't make sense to have a discovery process during that
Okay.
time. So all of that was kind of put on hold. I imagine it's going to be, I would project at least a month,
Mm-hmm.
maybe longer
Mm-hmm.
before that continues.
Okay, so do you think that after the discovery process, what's kind of your when you look ahead at this and you go, okay, we got this discovery process going. When it's all said and done, do you feel like this is going to get tossed? The
I
lawsuit will
do.
get tossed. You do? Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the kind of the process of moving forward with everything a little bit up in the air, what's been the process? What's been your conversation with the festival about this year's event? Obviously, we know Corona, but other than the coronavirus, what's been the conversation about what may or may not come this summer?
Well, our commitment was to have that field ready
Yep.
for the festival come festival time. So we've been,
Mm-hmm.
making good on that promise and moving
Okay.
forward with construction of the new field. Everything's on schedule and everything, and of course, you know, in, an a pandemic like this,
Mm-hmm.
everything is kind of thrown into question potentially.
Sure.
But we did check in with our vendors, our suppliers, our contractors. As of right now, everybody's still a go on this thing. Products
Okay.
still available,
Cool.
all that stuff, which is
Good.
pretty impressive, really.
That
Um,
really is.
so it's really on the festival.
Okay.
And I can't speak for the festival. I don't know where they're at in terms of booking their acts.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a contract with them for this year. So we're all, we've done everything that we can do on our
Okay.
end. Beyond that, it's kind of in the festival's hands, and I'm not sure. I can't speak for the festival. at this time.
No, yeah, and I put a couple feelers out to get someone from the festival on our show. So if you want to put in a word for me, say hey, it might be good to have a chat with me. um, one of the things that we're, when we look at this whole process, obviously there's a difference in reading of the law. There's a difference in understanding, kind of how the city is understanding it versus how the county is understanding it. And one of the things that I always get, I'm always frustrated with binary thinking, and what I mean by that is that, and we're seeing it right now happen all over this coronavirus. It's either black or it's white.
Mm-hmm.
It's either this or it's that. And I'm imagining that with law, generally that's the case. And yet we have lawyers because there's gray area.
Right.
So
Everything's debatable.
everything's debatable. And so when you look forward and, long term, with the field done, with the festival, and hopefully you will, whether it's goes in favor of the county or goes in favor of you, at least you guys will know exactly where you stand and what's going to happen.
Right.
Then you can make plans. Like again,
Right.
where it's another unknown thing as long as this thing is going on. And the
Mm-hmm.
state legislature may chime in at some point, or who
That's
knows
right.
what may happen over the course of time. So when you look forward, what are some things that, I guess the best way to ask would be, what are some things that you look forward to once all of this dust settles with the city and the county? What are some things that you're actually looking forward to in partnering with the county for the future?
You just mean more broadly.
Yeah, sure. Anything. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're always looking for opportunities to partner with the county across all kinds of whole range of different um, you know issues, really.
Mm-hmm.
With this pandemic issue, right?
Right.
We partnered with the county with this multi-agency task force
Okay.
that we convened together with a variety of healthcare providers in our community, with the school districts and others to better resource each other and collaborate and communicate more effectively around
Okay.
how to deal with this thing. So that's just one
Great.
example.
How did that go?
We worked. Um,
How was that as far as a joint task force working together? How did that feel?
it felt really good. I think we have, it's been a great resource, I think, for everybody participating to get the latest up to date information and to know what our needs are
Okay.
as a community.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's been really helpful. I know it was, one of the first actions that came out of our first meeting, I recall, was Tom Albertson and a couple of the other board members at Lake Pend School District were at that meeting. And I know at that time they were getting a tremendous amount of pressure to
Mm-hmm.
close the schools down. And there was the big question of, do we do it? Do we not do it? What do we do here?
Right.
And so I feel like, going into that meeting, and Tom and the board had the opportunity to hear really from 30 different leaders in our
Wow.
community, representing everything from first responders and emergency services to
Sure.
every aspect of healthcare, to the city, to nonprofit leaders in our community and others. And I think they came out of there really well resourced and well informed, and having some good clarity in terms of where the community stands, and
Mm-hmm.
what the right call to make going forward is. And so those are the kinds of ways that we can sort of support each other, inform each other, and move together on important decisions.
Right. Yeah.
And certainly I can speak, from my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and just having the most up to date information and resources on the city side, to be able to have regular check-ins with Bonner General Health and Connecticut Health Services, Panhandle
Mm-hmm.
Health Department, and others, to know where we're at and
Mm-hmm.
where the pinch points are, and where we either need some more resources or we need to better support each other to
Right.
accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Do you
So, and I mean, that's one example, back
sure.
to your
Yeah.
original question,
Yeah.
other ways that we work together with the county. So, before it's actually, kind of been on the back burner for a while because there've been a number of things coming up, including the lawsuit and including the pandemic and other
Mm-hmm.
things. But one of our, we had a joint meeting together last year in 2019 to discuss regional planning issues.
Mm-hmm.
And the county is doing its still updating its comprehensive land use plan.
Okay.
Well, the city is also
Right.
going through that process right
Come
now.
on. Mm-hmm.
And so one of those areas of mutual interest is what's called the area of city impact.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a legally defined area around the city into which the city is reasonably expected to grow into the
Correct.
future.
Yeah.
And so those areas of city impact are really important in planning because they're really important to the city because at some point the city is likely to sort of inherit those areas. And so
Correct.
it's in the best interest of the city that they're developed in a way that's consistent with city planning and in terms of the city being able to manage, its infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the county has, has a different perspective on that because
Sure.
they have their own goals and objectives around, growth in the county
Mm-hmm.
and how they want to encourage and promote growth. And so it's not that anybody's right or wrong. It's that you have
Correct.
just two competing interests, and they're both
Yep.
valid interests. So,
Yep.
so those areas of city impact become kind of a negotiable, region for consideration. And so that's one area where the city and the county are working together to
Okay.
negotiate how development in those areas it will look in the say the 20-year future.
Do you think that the city's going to have any plans for annexation anytime soon?
We don't have any plans on, we haven't had any discussions around anything like that. But what I can tell you is that our community and our region is growing very rapidly. The whole
It
state of
is.
Idaho is the
Got it.
leading number one growth state in the nation right now.
Yeah.
Um, and certainly a huge part of that growth is up here in District 1 in the Northern Panhandle.
Yep.
And even right here in Sandpoint,
Yep.
we've grown anywhere from 3.6 to 5.2% in the
Mm-hmm.
last few years. So just incredible rate of growth. And, with that growth, there's obviously, pressure to expand and to
Right.
figure out where we can, we've been doing everything we can to try and infill. And that's been really the perspective of the 2009 comprehensive plan. Kind of the guiding principle
Okay.
there was,
Mm-hmm.
let's do what we can to infill as much as we
Right.
can so we can, accommodate that growth where we have the space in the city. But now we're kind of at the point where, we've kind of done that. There's still some more of that can happen, but
Mm-hmm.
now if we're going to continue to see this kind of growth, we're going to have to figure out how to accommodate it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to
Yeah.
have to figure out how to accommodate it in a way that people can still afford to live here. And we don't see rents and home prices like you see in Jackson or Aspen or Sun Valley or places like that,
Yeah.
where people that are from here can't afford to live here anymore. So
Yep.
that's the balance is how can we accommodate the growth so as not to see those astronomical house prices.
Well, that's kind of my cup of tea.
That is your cup of tea,
Yeah,
isn't
I think it is. It is, and I think that that part of the process must be in the planning side of allowing our growth to be more deliberate. And I think that we've not been deliberate in our growth. We've been really deliberate about maintaining character, which is good. I think we should do that. I think that we've been very deliberate around in the county and the city around what we don't want. And but the fact that we don't define what we want well doesn't allow us to grow the way we want.
it?
And so every time there's a boundary that's put up, people go whoop off to the side of it. It becomes like people will depending on whatever we do, people will find a way around whatever the limitations are that we put on something. So the more that we can steer that, and the more that, in the sense of like, this is what healthy growth can look like, that allows for huge community input, which I'm so glad that we're getting so much community involvement, at least within the city, specifically concerning. Ooh, I got dinged by something there. Sorry. Ooh. Yeah, everybody just heard a doo on the live stream. I think the more input that we can get. I'm glad the city's seems like you guys are doing a good job of trying to engage. Plugging the app now, Engage Sandpoint. You're trying to engage the city as far as getting people in that process. One of the things that seems like we must begin to do is decide, where are we going to put higher density? Like, we got to make a decision about this. And we've got to be okay with certain areas being higher density, because without annexation and increasing area city impact very quickly, as far as the sense of like allowing for higher density on the growth curve. And we don't want to turn into like entire Sully Valleys paved. We don't want to turn into, the entire road to Priest River is paved because, it's just development, which is that sprawl. We got to pick some places where we're willing to go high, because we're growing. And if we don't tell it where to go, it's just going to go wherever it goes. And that means prices are going to go wherever they go. So, I'm hopeful that, and I'm not talking about controlling the free market. I'm talking about having really good planning to say, this is how we want to grow, and this is what we're going to be okay with, because we're growing. In 10 years, everyone's going to be like, why didn't we back then choose to do that? Like, we're doing it now. We're like, man, I wish we would have set this up or done this, or allowed for more planning. So kudos to the city for getting a public involvement in this process. So there, my rant is over.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Chris. I think you're right on. We do as a community have to decide how and where we're going to accommodate that growth, because it is coming.
It is here.
And we don't want to be victims to it. We want to be steering it in the way that provides the greatest benefit to our community at large.
Oh, that's really good. So we've talked a little bit about housing. We've talked a lot about COVID-19 and all of the ins and outs of that. We've talked about, what's the process for the city as far as you getting more emergency powers, if that ever needs to happen. We've talked about what's happening with the city and the county. Were there any other topics that you really felt like, man, I just want to talk about this or share this concept, or something that's going on that you want to kind of get the word out?
No, I appreciate you asking. No, really. I feel like we kind of covered it all. As is probably obvious from this conversation, it's been all COVID all the time for me, for like everybody else, I think, for the last month or more. So I feel like there's actually maybe a little room now to for something else to happen, and it does feel like the last couple of days, it's kind of weird, but we're all still sort of adjusting to working not at the office too. So as I'm sure all of your listeners know, City Hall is also closed as of yesterday. So but city services are still open, so you can still get your normal city services, even applying for a building permit and all the normal stuff, paying your bills and all that stuff. Either through our website or through the Engage Sandpoint app, or just call in. And even our frontline staff is still at the end of the phone line through all this. So we're all working from home, and we're still engaged. It's just not normal. It's not like it normally is, but we're still here.
Yeah, and I will say, I think the more the more input and transparency you guys put in the process as we head out of COVID-19, the better it's going to be for everybody. I think especially everybody's got a little bit of stress. Everybody's got a little bit of wariness concerning what's coming next, what's going to happen next, either with the city, with the county, with the state. What's going to happen next. So I just really want to encourage you guys to just keep it out there. I have the Engage Sandpoint app on my phone. And I don't mean to do a shameless plug for the city, but let me just say that the app works well. Let me see if I can get that. Oh, it turned white here. Hang on. Oh, there you go. Okay. It's not going to focus because it's focused on my face. But there is a COVID-19 button there that you could push. And there's other thing about business closures, downtown construction, a lot of information on there. And you can turn on notifications, which sometimes I think notifications work, sometimes don't. You might want to check on that with your developer. But it's a great way to kind of keep up to date so that if there's decisions being made, lots of times we're only going to hear about what we see on Facebook, or Twitter or wherever, where somebody's got an issue with something. And oftentimes that you're not getting the whole story. So go to the app if you can. And usually those things are posted on there. It's very helpful. So great job on the app.
Yeah, I appreciate you plugging that. And I really encourage people, particularly through this crisis, the COVID-19 page we got uploaded this last Monday. And we really try to be the clearinghouse for all information, not just locally, and what we're doing as a city, and what resources are available, what things you need to know related to the coronavirus here at the local level, but also providing all the necessary links to CDC and all those national and state resources as well.
Yeah. Yep, that's good.
And again, to your point, and I'll plug that again, I really encourage people to sign up for those notifications. You can get notified of any council meetings, all of our council meetings, agendas, and packets, all the information that you need to know, that council needs to know to make an informed decision at every meeting. They're all available on our website almost a week ahead of time. So you can look through all that information and be just as informed as any council member or as myself. So I would encourage your listeners to sign up for those e-notifications. And it's not just for council meetings, but planning and zoning or any other committee or commission, or really anything you want to know that's going on in the city. That's great.
Yep. Good stuff. Good stuff. And you know what I learned to do, and you and I talked about this over lunch a couple of weeks ago, about specifically like, how do we get our data? Where do we get our information from? And I am such a fan of going to the source and reading actual documents, listening to actual speeches, not just what people parrot, listening to looking at the actual data. I'm always like, why don't they have a link in the story to the data that they're citing? It drives me nuts. So, I think if you have questions about what's the city doing, what's going on with the city, get the Engage Sandpoint app, because that takes you directly to the source, so that if you have questions, you're actually going to be educated on what the actual issue is, and what, if there's something. I'll just say this, like, for example, with the emergency powers thing, I really appreciated a few people who put, here's the Idaho code around that. Great. Like, we can look at that and go, okay, here's what that could entail. Here's what that could look like for the mayor to have emergency power. Okay, now we have to ask, what's the guideline? What's the why? Where's this going? Because we don't know, so that's part of that whole process that I think for those that want to be in the know and stay current with what's going on, and you want to be an influencer in our region, do the research. Take a minute and take a look. So there's my 2 cents on that.
That's great. I appreciate that.
I'm excited because I got 2 great interviews coming up next week. I'm going to sit down with Justin Dick from Trinity. We're going to have a Zoom call on Monday. And then Tuesday, I'm supposed to have a Zoom call with Christine DeNova from Life Choices Pregnancy Center. So we're trying to trying to do I'll probably be doing more shows while my system at the housing agency has slowed down. We're still considered an essential service in the development construction of homes. So, which we've got projects that we're working on, but everything's slowed down. Yeah. So we got good shows coming up. So I appreciate you coming on. Shelby, any last thoughts?
No, Chris, it's always a pleasure. Really enjoy chatting with you, and I wish all of your viewers out there health and strength and happiness through these times.
Yeah, good. Awesome. Well, I want to say a quick thank you, of course, to our season sponsor, Ting. Ting is crazy fast fiber internet. They offer true gigabit up and download speeds that come directly to your house. If you don't have Ting fiber, crazy fast fiber internet at your house, go to ting.com/Sandpoint. Plug in your address and it will tell you if it is in your area. If it's not, pre-register. I think it's like $10 to pre-register, but you will save $200 on installation, and it lets them know where to go next as they continue to expand their footprint for fiber internet up here. So we thank you so much, Ting, for your sponsorship. And of course, thank you to BCHA, Barnard Community Housing Agency, for providing us what I'm calling right now the digitally isolated cave here that I get to broadcast from. And so thank you so much, BCHA, for your work. If you go to bonnerhousing.org, if you have questions about housing, you have questions about evictions, Idaho housing, you have questions about any of that stuff, we are putting links and updates on our homepage right at the very top. And now that the stimulus bill is done, I will be posting links of everything concerning housing in the stimulus and kind of where to go and how to get help if you need help. So go to bonnerhousing.org if you have housing questions during the COVID-19 isolation process. So with that, we're done here. Thank you so much. Shelby, hang on the line here for just a second, and we'll do a little debrief, but we're going to get the closing credits rolling and get off the live stream here. So here we go. Thank you for watching this episode of the Barnard Breakdown. Special thanks to Ting and BCHA for sponsoring this show. For more shows or to be a guest, please visit barnardbreakdown.com. Have a great day.